how do you feel about that first 4 years? Do you feel you are where you thought you would be? Have there been any surprises along the way? Have there been any challenges that you faced? And then we can talk a bit more about the future.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you so much. It's very nice to be in the Center for Global Development, and yours is a renowned institution. You have contributed so much to the convergence of views, to providing advisory services to many institutions, to the government. And I think it's really a great privilege and an honor to be here. As you were saying, there was a little crisis this morning, and I'm happy to hear when we walk into this conference room, even though a couple of minutes late, the problem was resolved. So there's always a solution, particularly when people are desperate and they want to risk everything. That is the moment I think we should keep people calm down and try to work out something. Of course, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has been attracting a lot of attention over the last 6 years. It took us 2 years to negotiate the Articles Agreement, setting up the stage, and we are almost 4 years by the end of this year, right? It's 4 years now. I think looking back, we have learned a lot. For those who are outside or for those who are inside, we learned a lot that, first of all, in the 21st century, when we are faced with a lot of challenges, we must try to find some solution or part of the solution. And we need to think outside the box. We need to blaze the trail and working out some new and creative, innovative approaches to solving so many problems we are faced with. There are 3 issues: vision, mission, and a commission. The vision was very clear. I think it's the collective vision. In 2013, 2014, after President Xi Jinping proposed this idea in the Bali APEC conference. But that was not really a very easy question, because the people often asked, why do you want to set up a new bank when we have a number of development banks to serve the low-income countries, to serve the developing countries? And these banks have been doing pretty well. So what's the point to set up a new bank? And another question related to that is, do you think it's cost-effective to put the money in the existing institutions or to set up a new bank, which probably would induce people to assume at least, that to set up a new one is more costly. And we did not look at that way. So the vision is to set up a new bank, new multilateral development bank with a 21st century governance, fit for taking the challenges faced by all of us. So in spite of the name, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, we decided to be inclusive. The membership is open to all the members of the World Bank and AIIB. The reason is they are all of them the members of the IMF. So we still need to work within the framework of the global financial system set up under the leadership of the United States in 1944. All right? So that's the vision. And the mission, the World Bank has been doing a lot of things, and its focus has evolved over the years. Earlier on, the World Bank focused very much on infrastructure, reconstruction, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, very clear. But by 1980, and I think with outbreak of the Mexican debt crisis, the World Bank started to shift its focus a little bit. Economic restructuring, and then later on, poverty reduction, social issues. So it's evolving. What should this bank be? Infrastructure. Why infrastructure? Because given the experience of China and many Asian countries, we understood that infrastructure paved the path for sustained development. But another question would arise. You build roads, railways, airports, seaports. What's next? There must be productive sectors to take advantage of this infrastructure. So in negotiating the articles agreement, we said this bank is to promote broad-based economic social development through investment in infrastructure and other productive sectors. And then people asked me, Natalie was here, she's the architect of the articles agreement. Say, Mr. Jing, what do you mean by other productive sectors? And I said, other productive sectors means other productive sectors. I remember EBRD was created in 1990 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The mission was very narrowly defined to provide support to those economies from the former communist economies to market economy. 15 years or something, mission completed. And some people even talked about shutting it down. So we thought probably in our bank, the mission should be defined broadly. And people ask me, how about education, health? And my view is, if you think they are productive sectors, then we will do it, but not anytime soon. And then Foreign Issues Commission, which we're all deeply committed to work together to create a bank as we envisioned. But this bank should remain in the gene pool of the MDB family, but should have its new features. Otherwise, it's really redundant.
So I think thank you very much for that kind of overview on it. And I think that's a nice point at which to go into sort of what is the distinguishing feature. So I think, as you say, one is you have a focus, infrastructure, productive sectors. Second thing, I think that in a way that AIIB has had, which many other MDBs management admires, is your governance structure. It's a very lean governance structure, and there's a very clear distinction, accountability of management, of the board, and the relationship between them. The third thing, in a way, is that you have actually quite a small staff for the amount of work that you do, and that's quite lean in that sense. Now, the other side of this, of course, is that about half the projects that you've done have been done co-financing with others. And so one question people would ask is, to what extent are you bringing more than money to the table? So are you going to be involved in preparing projects? Are you basically going to be a sort of more of a co-financier going forward? Are you going to be more of a generator of projects? And if you do that, is there going to be a tension between that and some of your business model in terms of being as lean on staff as you have been? So I think that's kind of one of the questions that'd be worth exploring a little bit.
You see, I read a lot of books about Bretton Woods institutions, particularly the debate in Bretton Woods about creating the World Bank, IMF, and a governance structure. And basically it's the discussion or debate between John Maynard Keynes and Harry Dexter White. But that was 1944. It was not a digital age. It's not an age in which you can solve a lot of problems by the click of your mouse. Okay. And most of the travelers between the two worlds, the old and new, still depended on the ocean-going ships rather than fly. So are we going to have a new institution with the governance structure fully patterned on the Bretton Woods institutions? Which means, should we have the resident board? Or should we learn from the private sector companies with a non-resident board, which meet 4 times a year, plus some probably virtual board meetings through this video conference? I was strongly, I think, opposed to resident board. The board's function, first of all, in my view, is to approve the policies and the major policy strategies. The board should not be directly involved in approval of specific investments. Look at the private sector. The board members mostly are real owners of the institution, except independent directors. Just because this is your institution, your company, your bank, you want to hire a professional team to run this institution. But of course, they have to follow your general guidance, what kind of business you are in. But do you think it's a little bit irrational? You pay a lot of money to the management team, and then you make your own decisions, right? And if they make mistakes, the management will say, hey, you board approve everything. It's not my responsibility. So why should we have this kind of very bizarre system? It's history, okay? We understand. Because the Bretton Woods institutions were the institutions whose shareholders are the governments. Now, the next question. Yes, the governments are the shareholders. Who were those people who were sitting on the board? The governments? No. Agents. The agents were love to do everything, for the government, out of very good intention, I would say. So we want to change this. My view is, we would like to have a very clear division of responsibility. The board approves the policies, strategies. The board should select a very good CEO and delegate the responsibility to CEO and the team, which the CEO appoints. And then, if anything happens, you cannot go scot-free. You cannot make reckless decisions with impunity, because the board said, we delegate to you the right. So when I lobby the European countries, inviting them to join, and I discussed this issue, I said, actually, this new governance structure, by this, we are asking for troubles. Why should we ask for the delegation? You board continue to approve projects. Anything happens, it's your problem, it's not my problem. Why should we do that? This is a sense of responsibility. This is, in my view, commitment. And I don't think the management should be handsomely paid and go scot-free if anything happens. We should put stop to this kind of thing. And then, with regard to co-financing of freestanding projects, we have enjoyed excellent relationship with the World Bank, EBRD, AIIB. Yeah, very good. And there's no such thing that this bank is undercutting the other institutions. Contrary to the expectation of a lot of people, we didn't have this kind of troubles. But you see, co-financing is important for infrastructure projects which are normally very large. For instance, the project we cooperated with the World Bank and the commercial banks, TANAP, gas pipeline from Azerbaijan
Right.
to Turkey all the way to the border of Italy. And in the future, I think this gas pipeline would be a very good channel for the gas to southern European countries. $8.6 billion, not including $1 billion provided by the AIIB. So we can diversify the risks, and particularly when it comes to the so-called country exposure limit. By working together, we do a project. And also when all these MDBs work together, they could have very effective policy dialogue with the government. So co-financing is important, not because we're new, even 10, 20 years later, as long as we do large-scale infrastructure projects, we would co-finance. But of course, on the other hand, to develop the in-house capability to finance freestanding projects is also important for us.
So let me just go to another set of questions. You said you now have 100 members.
Yeah.
And some of them are not borrowing members. Some of them are middle-income countries where your current business model works well. But there are also some which are lower-income countries. And I guess one of the questions will be, to what extent will you be able to operate in that set of countries? To what extent do you want to be able to operate in that set of countries? And if you do, will your current sort of non-concessional financing be a good business model for that, or do you need to get concessional financing? Now, I know if you get into concessional financing, you then get into the business of trying to get donors to be providing that, and that, of course, changes a little bit the relationship between the bank and the shareholders also. So I'd like to hear a little bit your thinking on that.
It's very interesting. You see, I said the bank is the product of collective wisdom. Collective wisdom comes from those who are very much experienced in the MDB institutions, government officials who were in charge of the MDBs, and also private sector experts. And personally, as you know, I was on the board of the bank for 6 years, and I was in the management team of AIIB 5 years, plus 5 years of experience in doing the sovereign wealth fund and Chinese investment bank. So I've been thinking, I was thinking about all these issues before I took this job. I said, how could we develop a bank which can stand on its own feet? You see, it's a painful process to negotiate a capital increase for IBRD or either, particularly for the concessional funding. Replenishment and a capital increase. And then it occurred to me that there was a very interesting question. If I were the CEO of the private company, do you think, and if you were the boss, shareholder, do you think I could come to you every 5 years? Hey, boss, I need more money. I need capital increase. And your question is, I gave you this job. You should help me increase the capital, not coming back to me. You should give the money to me instead of the other way around. But how many people have thought about this over the last 7 decades? Capital increase has been taken for granted. These institutions, because of the old structure, have to depend on capital increase and replenishment of concessional funds. My idea, this bank should stop milking the shareholders, should contribute. Do you think it's possible? Of course. You see, we did not want to have this bank depend particularly on concessional funding. We want this bank to be able to achieve reasonable profit on its own. Achieving reasonable profit not maximizing profit, fits into the MDB. If we are profitable, our clients are profitable. Comfortable, profitable margin. And we also have a new system. We have all the members which are eligible for borrowing from this bank. If the United States were a member, US can borrow from this bank by the Articles of Agreement. But they all decided we should leave the money to low-income countries. They reserve the right to borrow, but we don't lend to developed countries. So we don't have part one country, part two country. My view is, if a country is momentarily in trouble, why not supporting it, be it OECD country or not? Just like IMF. IMF can come to the rescue any country if that country is in trouble. For me, there are three types of countries. Emerging market economies, emerged and submerged. If some countries are submerged, we help them out. So, no division between part one and part two countries. And we can invest in high middle income countries. You may have noticed, we don't take poverty reduction as the central focus. We want to have poverty reduction being dealt with by the economic and social development. A rising tide lifts all the boats. Given China's experience, how could you manage to lift 800 million people out of poverty? Poverty reduction itself cannot do it. In my farewell statement in AIIB, I said, poverty reduction in and of itself cannot solve the problem. Only broad-based economic social development. So we don't have this kind of thing. And this can also help the World Bank focus on poverty reduction, and we focus on infrastructure, right?
So I think I like this, the way that you classify that this is a bit more like a cooperative. All the members, in a way, have the same rights to be able to borrow. They may choose, they may not choose, but legally there's no obstacle to that. The issue, and I think the important point also that you raised, that once you get into the business of being an agent for disbursing concessional money that comes from others, your relationship with the providers of concessional money changes from that of the sort of the way you describe the bank and the shareholders to an agent and principal relationship. And that's a very different kind of relationship, which you say you want to be more self-contained. I do wonder, though, whether that, without that concessional funds, whether in a way that will limit the scope in terms of some countries who may not be able to borrow on those terms. And that's a strategy choice in a way that you would make.
As I said, our strategy is to achieve reasonable returns. We would like to push for private sector all the way to 50-50, okay? And that can help us expand the capital base. And the reason we want to help high middle income countries is that we could have very high quality assets. One of the disadvantages I'm faced with is that we do not lend to China in large amount. We don't have this good client for obvious reasons. China said, we set up this bank, we don't want to crowd out other developing countries. But we can lend in moderation to China for connectivity on the borders, for dealing with climate change or something of that kind. But this is very limited. So we lose good clients. But if we can invest in high middle income countries, that can strengthen the intrinsic value of our bank. Thereby, we can take higher risks in helping low income countries. We can balance that out, right? Concessional funding would be welcome on one condition. We decide how to spend it. But of course, according to the general principle of the donors, but donors should not be directly involved. Yeah. And for instance, we have the grant, which is special fund contributed by China, UK, and Hong Kong, and also Korea or something. We make it a rule. It's AIIB fund, not China fund, Korean fund, UK fund, Germany fund. And then you have a proliferation of these trust funds. If you want to put money in the fund, you do it. And this is AIIB fund. But we certainly put your name on it. Who's the contributor? And the way we spend the money is approved by the board. See? So if any country is willing to give us concessional funding, welcome. But we don't want to have the proliferation of donors. And we would like to have every 5 years we negotiate. And then you will find you are imposed with lots of political agenda. And then I don't think that's worth it.
No. Good. I want to kind of broaden out a bit from the bank itself to step back a bit and look at the environment, the economic environment in which you're operating. And of course, as you said, one of the core objective was really to fund infrastructure projects and other productive sectors. And 4 years ago, when everybody met in Addis, there was this big discussion about how we were going to mobilize private financing for development, particularly for infrastructure. And today, when you look at the actual numbers, you look at the experience, turns out that it's more difficult to mobilize private financing than maybe we had thought at the time. The sort of billions to trillions narrative, many people are now questioning how easy it's going to be to make that happen. And I want to get a bit your sense of how do you see the scope for private financing in infrastructure? Do you think that we are kind of being too optimistic about it? Do you think that there's potential, but we are not trying to find the right ways to get it? Where do you see the breakthrough?
You see, if you think you want to achieve something, if you want to achieve some objective, you could be over-optimistic or it should be just about right, depending how long you do it. If we want to develop this bank with 50-50 private sector, public sector, it's going to be an annual $10 billion bank. We want to achieve this in 2 or 3 years. It's over-optimistic. Right. It's not achievable. So it's a function of the duration or time, right? Time frame. I think I have to go back to the issue. You said this bank would be very lean because lean, clean, and green. Right. What does lean mean? We are now only 300 people from 43 countries. It's lean. Is it right? Of course. But when we grow to take on more responsibilities and develop our program, certainly we cannot do it with 300. So being lean means no redundancy. Now, we have $100 billion of capital, and if we have selective capital increase to accommodate new members beyond 57, right, probably we would have $130, $140 billion. How many people? And then you take some reference of the similar institutions. If we can achieve the same lending program by 2/3 or half of the staff, then we are very lean, right? So being lean means avoiding institutional obesity, avoiding redundancy. You create just about right positions to do the job. That's being lean. And we are not going to have large resident missions. The board members keep asking me, when do you set up the resident mission in my country? And I might say, no, please. People talk about thinking outside the box, but they always enjoy staying inside the box. Do we need to have a large resident mission and the total budget of that mission would eat up all the revenues of the lending to that particular country? Are we going to repeat this beaten track? That's why you have to go back to shareholders asking for capital increase again and again. But I have no problem with local presence. With local presence, maybe you have the core team setting up in a particular country dealing with essential issues. When the World Bank decentralized many years ago, it was a good idea. But why do you stay in Washington? You should go to the field. Fine. But after they all went to the field, some people say, hey, who's going to look after them? Who's going to monitor them? And then you find that Washington, D.C. grows. Again, that is complete redundancy. Right? So that's the lesson. I'm not denigrating, I'm not disparaging anybody. But I think any institution, any human being would make mistakes. It's perfectly all right. But it's idiotic to repeat the same mistake made by others. So we would have a different approach. And also, you see, we have the business line, which I picked up from the private company. We don't have country focus. Country focus is good because you focus on the relationship with a particular country. You listen to them. You have dialogues with them. That's the upside. Downside, the professionals are locked up in that particular region. Without projects. You don't have a road project every year. You don't have railway project every year. But all these experts were locked up there. We have 3 departments now: transport and water, energy, urban development, and other productive sectors. So these staff of professionals are fully deployed. They work in country 1, country B, country C. They move around. They will not say, hey, what I'm going to do. Or I work myself to death because the workload, it is so heavy. So there are lots of innovations we need to do. I think we should be willing to change, willing to adapt. So far, we have worked out our approach purely based on experience of the MDBs over the last 7 decades, a half century, and many private sector companies. And we try to explore new approaches. We will make mistakes, but we try to minimize the incidence of mistakes. And most importantly,
Don't make it twice.
don't make the same mistake twice, and don't make big mistakes. So we think it's important to rely on collective wisdom. In our bank, no resolution was made and handed down without a thorough debate and discussion in the executive committee. I didn't call the shots. I didn't do that. And sometimes, we allow some issues to be discussed for a long time. I almost run the risk of being the Prince of Denmark. But I'm not afraid, because we need to give time to the senior management members to work this out, unless it's really very urgent, and then I have to make a decision. And if I do, I'm held accountable.
All right. So I think I'd like to open it up, and I'm sure many people who have been listening to you will have questions or comments that they want to put, and I want to make sure that we give them a chance. I also want to encourage those of you that are online, if you have any questions, please send them in and we'll take those as well. So let's see, who would like to lead off? See, 1, 2. So maybe I'll start with the lady there and then the gentleman behind, and there's somebody who will bring a microphone to you. So maybe we'll take 3 questions at a time.
No problem. Yeah.
That way it would be.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Rashmi Kumar, and I'm a reporter at Global Markets newspaper. My question is, we face extraordinary challenges that are likely to become more fluid and fast evolving over the next few years, from climate change to commodity wars to uncontrolled immigration. How do you think MDBs can get better at combating these challenges and become more fluid in their thinking? Thank you.
MDBs and global challenges. Yep, please, gentleman behind.
Speaking of global challenges, I'm James Schwimline, Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Thank you for being here. There's a lot of talk about the potential role of multilateral banks in resolving North Korea, or in the next step in North Korea. Has AIIB considered this? Has AIIB considered under what conditions it could engage? You talk about the requirement of IMF membership. I mean, that's obviously not going to happen with North Korea anytime soon, but how do you think of the question? And then if I can ask a second question on the other end of the things, you talked a lot very constructively about the role of the private sector. Has AIIB made any progress in the investment funds approach, the kind of initial effort that was made to think about how to co-finance with traditional private equity firms? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So,
maybe
just
one more question.
One more, and then
One
we'll
more.
continue. The lady here, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for excellent talk and the introduction about AIIB. I'm Su Qinggao from Harvard Economic Department. My question is, you just talk about the three missions about the AIIB investment in energy, transportation, and other production sectors. And from my opinion, this is also basic target from Chinese Silk Road Economic Initiative. And I mean, basically focused on China's Silk Road partner countries. So my question is 2 points. First point is how the AIIB combine the infrastructure investment policy with Chinese Silk Road Economic Initiative. And the second part, slightly behind this infrastructure, because 2019 China economic policy promote the digitalization in every sectors, social services, infrastructure, and in particular financial infrastructure, digital financial infrastructure. So I think the digitalization of financial infrastructure is also a very big target to promote the financial cooperation, investment cooperation between developing countries. So I think any proposal or policies is the infrastructure investment bank has to investment in digital financial infrastructure.
Right.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Let me answer these questions, okay? First of all, the MDBs can contribute a lot to poverty reduction, economic, social development. But MDBs should know they have their own limitations. MDBs are not expected to achieve everything, do everything for everybody. That's wrong. If you are over-ambitious, probably you cannot achieve the objectives you set for yourself. The MDBs work in any country under sound, healthy macroeconomic policy and regulatory environment. We cannot go beyond that. I would pay a tribute to the World Bank, AIIB, and EBRD, these banks who have over the years done a lot to have policy dialogue to help those countries improve the macroeconomic environment, which is very much laudable, commendable. But still, we should understand MDB's abilities are limited. The main job is to finance projects, infrastructure investment, social projects, or environment under a sound economic and macroeconomic system. So that is why you see the difference with the same kind of efforts, commitment by MDBs. The results in different countries are not the same. So we should be humble enough to understand we have our limitations. Okay, we cannot replace the function of any government. And with regard to the mission, as I said, we try to define the mission of this bank in a very broad way. Infrastructure and other productive sectors. How about dealing with climate change? Do you define this as infrastructure or not? But actually, climate change has a lot to do with the human, industrialization, all these kind of things. So if we finance infrastructure in a new way, in a more environmentally benign way, we can reduce the emissions, right? Or we can deal directly with the climate change. The only project so far we have done for China It's $250 million project for coal to gas conversion. And we financed that project not simply to clean up the air quality in Beijing. We want to demonstrate how we can do it, right? So dealing with climate change is considered a very important part of our mission. However, in whatever way you define this, anyway, we're going to do it. And this is our major efforts. But dealing with climate change comes in different ways. Coal to gas conversion, renewable energy, certainly important. But how about promoting mass transit system? How about improving the smart power grid? How about upgrading the transmission and distribution system? In some of the low-income countries, the systemic loss of power transmission could be as high as 30%. In this country, less than 5%. And if you can cut the systemic loss, it amounts to building numerous power plants. So this is very much important for us. And, trade disputes or immigration are issues which probably go beyond the mandate of the MDBs. But I believe if we can help stabilize the economy of so many developing countries, people will be happy to stay at home rather than risking their lives, moving to other countries, right? And it's really very tough. And sometimes it makes your heart, really break to see all those horrible, situations. Trade. Trade disputes are not something new. It happens. As long as the trade dispute will not escalate into trade war, right? But how can you do that? I would say we need to help many of our client countries to improve their economy, improve their technology, and helping those countries moving up on the value chain. I think that's important. Competition is important in our way, but we should avoid the problems which lead to the backlash of globalization. So we cannot directly deal with all these issues, but I think we can contribute. With regard to the issue of, for instance, North Korea or some kind of political issues, again, this is outside the purview of the MDBs. But I think as soon as the nuclear non-proliferation nuclear deal was reached and the nuclear problem was resolved, and the MDB should try to help North Korea without delay, right? Finally, you talked about the mandates of this bank. It's interesting to note China's experience of developing economy based on infrastructure is not unique. This experience, it was demonstrated to us by Japan, by South Korea, by the so-called Four Tigers and many Asian countries. So that kind of experience informed the policy or design of this institution. But you have noticed that the projects we process, projects we finance, all came from the borrowing countries. The bank has never ever picked any projects from the list of the Chinese government for any other country. All the projects must be proposed to us by the client governments or by the private sector of the country. We do not pick projects from China's NDRC. But if a particular project proposed to us by, let's say, Vietnam, Cambodia, or Bangladesh, happens to be one which also be supported by China, which is very good indeed, right? But whatever kind of projects we do, they must follow the standard of this bank. Thank you.
Good. So let me take, I have lady in the front here, there's the lady in the back there,
So the gentleman.
and then there is a gentleman over there. Yeah. So let's talk.
Thank you. My name is Noya. I recently graduated from Harvard and currently with the World Bank. My question is related to the infrastructure, digital infrastructure actually. Because I remember one of the times there was a minister from Sierra Leone, and he was saying that Africa is going to need a different type of infrastructure development compared to what America and the UK did a decades ago. So my question is, what does the digital technological infrastructure play a role with the AIIB?
Okay, that's one. Right in the back there. Thank you.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Tony Waterman with Feature Story News. I have a question, and you touched upon this already, and I just want to kind of explore it a little more, and this is with the trade dispute, the ongoing trade dispute and the geopolitical tensions that we see. Has that already impacted the way in which the AIIB functions, the projects that it chooses, or the loan structure perhaps going forward, whether it's USD-denominated loans or if you're switching out to other currencies?
Okay, and then there's a gentleman in the back there.
Thank you very much. President Jin, thank you very much for taking time. I know how busy this week is, so we really appreciate you being here. I'm Larry Hanna, and I used to work for the World Bank, and I have one thing in common with you. I benefited from Natalie's partnership for many years. So my question is quite simple. You started off telling us very clearly what's different about AIIB, that is a modern governance structure, and I think a lot of us understand the importance of infrastructure. So my question is, not just the financing part, but have you thought about the very basis of AIIB and how that should be attached or not attached or delivered together with infrastructure? Maybe that's what we call soft infrastructure these days. We've learned that just putting the hard infrastructure in the ground isn't enough. You need to have good governance. So my question is, are you beginning or are you already doing that?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right. That's a
You see, digital infrastructure is important. But digital infrastructure cannot develop in a very poor country, which is lacking in physical infrastructure, in the traditional physical infrastructure. It's impossible. You must have power supply. You must have everything physical. And this is a physical world. And if you want to do away with things physical, you will be in trouble. So when we help some of the African countries develop their economy and help them break away from the traditional colonial trading pattern, exporting raw materials, importing manufactured goods, if we can help them move up on the value chain, digital infrastructure development in those countries will have a sound basis. But we don't have to wait until all the physical infrastructures are ready. No, you don't have to. You can build a physical infrastructure and at the same time develop a digital infrastructure. I think this is the new approach, right? Trade dispute. And it's interesting to note, and I certainly very happy to hear about the agreement between US and China about the first phase or partial whatever, I will hope this is a very, very good progress. I made a comment in the European House and Ambrosetti conference held in Lake Como in Italy. I said, have you noticed the United States treated or regarded the trade problems between China and the US as war, whereas China treated or regard the trade problems as dispute? War and dispute are two different things. Now, it tells the attitude you take towards any problems faced by us. I think as long as we can take a proactive and conciliatory approach, I think we can solve lots of problems. But the trade dispute, if it goes on, to say nothing about trade war, it's all out war, would definitely impact on many of the countries who are our borrowers. And the pressure would be, I think, reflected in many areas. Some of these countries' exports may maybe I think hit a wall. For instance, a lot of these Asian countries run trade surplus against China for so long. But if China is in trouble, but China would have reduced the capacity to deal with the trade deficit running against all those countries. So it would be going to happen. And then that would directly impact on the debt sustainability of those countries, which depend on the export income to finance the infrastructure projects, social projects, and to repay the debt. So definitely, this is going to be a problem. So that's why we're looking forward to a solution, not just a partial solution, but a complete solution between the US and China. And I wish these two countries good luck. And with regard to the software part, and this is a very subtle issue, you see. Now, we are trying to work with the client countries in and helping them improving the policy and regulatory framework, not through direct policy consultations, not through some kind of, I think, exerting some kind of pressure on them. We don't think this is the right way. You see, I remember in my own country, many years ago, I was involved in 1980, right, after China joined the World Bank. The World Bank gave us a lot of policy advices. We did only a few, very limited. And the reaction, Volker is here, the reaction was pretty negative. You want to deal with, you want to dictate the policy issues. China was not ready at that time. And very interesting, the first resurrect, Alim proposed lots of ideas. And that in those days, marginal cost, we never heard about it. We have only average cost, something like that.
Low average cost.
Yeah, low average cost. And then Peter Butler later on became ResRep. So a couple of years later, Edwin came back and said, he was very jealous. Peter, you did all these kind of things which I proposed, and you got the credit. And I said, no. You also have the credit. You're right. But your advice came a little bit early. Okay, China couldn't do it. So learning from this, in our view, we don't want to put too much pressure on the government. Anything good would be appreciated. But if they cannot do it, don't push them too hard. So in terms of this software part, we are a little bit patient. I take this as a kind of acquired taste. Acquired taste is not natural taste. Sugar, oh, you love it, right? A little bit sour, you like it. But chili or this kind of thing, some of this, you hate it. And if you eat Chinese mapo tofu, right, bean curry, you hate it. But then you develop a liking. And you think, this is wonderful. So for me, for instance, I love to listen to classical music. Classical music, lots of very good classical music, didn't sound very well in my ear. But once I learned to appreciate it, I never get bored. See, acquired taste. And also, very good policies are also the acquired tastes. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I think on that note, and given the time, let me thank you, Li Chen, for coming to this. Let me thank all of you for braving the somewhat difficult conditions, but being here in person, and to all of you online as well. Thanks once again. Please raise a hand for our guest.
I'm very sorry I could not pick more questions. I promise I would come back if I'm welcome.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.